So in John 8, Jesus is teaching, and his nemesis, the scribes and Pharisees, who are just looking to trip him up by this point, just can't stand him and always trying to get something on him. He's teaching in the temple, and this is what they pull. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst of this temple here, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commands us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" Did you catch that? They caught her in the act of adultery. Let's talk about that. I'm Zach. This is The Average Christian. If you're not familiar with us, it's a project about sharing the word, sharing the gospel, mainly for Christians. It's trying to help us figure out what it means to live an everyday Christian, practical life, in the trenches. And we're doing that by talking about, of course, the Bible and the word. And we're also dispelling myths about Christianity. And along the way, again, just trying to make this usable and practical, learn how to live these things out, these concepts that we often hear about. So if you're joining us on podcast, thank you. We're asking you to subscribe if you haven't already, to rate and review this. And if you're on YouTube, welcome as well. We want you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you keep up with the content that's coming out. Hit the notification bell, and that lets you know when new content releases, usually on Thursdays. And if this video helps you, share it with other people, and comment. If you have comments about the content here, if you have suggestions about other content, things you'd like to hear about, let us know in some way. All right, so Jesus is in the temple, and there's really just a few basic lessons out of this. He's in the temple and he's teaching. He's already gone through this waxing and waning popularity, and the most religious people, I think we often call them scribes and Pharisees, and we forget who these people really were and what they stood for. And they were the utmost, the high standard when it comes to being religious and faithful, and people looked up to them. And all they want to do is trip up Jesus. They want to stop him. They don't believe he says who he is. And they haven't, as skilled as they are in the law, they've missed that the old law pointed to Jesus. And they have no idea who he is because they probably don't want to know. So now Jesus is at a temple. They find a good time. They catch a woman in adultery. Now you got to think about this. When you are looking to hurt somebody, to take somebody down, to trip somebody up, and you use another human being like they do here, it's really a sickening thing. And I know that you can make some parallels in our culture, but they just find this woman in the act of adultery. I mean, imagine that scenario. First of all, they catch the woman doing what with whoever, and pull her into the temple and announce, I guess, in the middle of when Jesus is teaching, "Hey, we caught this woman in adultery. By the way, the law of Moses says we ought to stone her." Now, there are provisions and laws under the Old Covenant and the Old Testament that call for stoning, but there's a lot more to it than, "Hey, we caught this woman, so let's throw rocks at her. What do you say?" Well, they knew that Jesus wasn't going to go that way, and they should have known the law was about more than just catching people in a gotcha moment and destroying them. But they're trying to mess with Jesus here. They're trying to trip him up. They're trying to get him to say something that they can hold against him and to undermine him. And so, as I mentioned there, as I read at the beginning of the video, verses 3 and 4, we're in John chapter 8. And they want to throw rocks at this woman. So not only did they catch her in adultery, I want you to see how abusive they are. They don't really care about the truth. They don't care about, Jesus said that at one point they strained at gnats and swallowed camels. So they're all about these little details and law, but they didn't really care about people. And this proves it. So not only did they catch her in this, embarrass her, and bring her into the temple in front of everybody, now they're talking about discarding her by stoning her as a means to get to Jesus. Like how, look, the law of Moses says we ought to stone her, so let's all go pick up some rocks and stone her. Some of us today, and some of you today, and if you're thinking, well, not me, then you better take a harder look. We treat people like this too. We say things, before I get into the rest of this, we say things like, "I can't believe that so-and-so did this, that, and the other." And but by the way, that reminds me, I need to do a video on gossip and slander. But we say things like, "I can't believe so-and-so did X, Y, and Z." And I'm thinking, as I get older, man, God could look at me and you the same way and say, "I can't believe After what all I've done with Jesus and what all I've done through human history, that you would do whatever it is you're guilty of and whatever it is I'm guilty of. But that's basically what they're doing here. They don't really care about the person. They don't care about her sin. They don't care about her relationship with God. They just want to hurt Jesus. They want to prove a point. And so she becomes this, a commodity in the midst of their argument here against Jesus. This they said to test him, it says in verse 6, that they might have some charge to bring against him. And Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. Anybody who tells you that they know what Jesus wrote on the ground is lying, because it's not in there. I don't know if he was writing anything of any significance. I don't know if he was just doodling in the dirt. Whatever the case is, he bends down, whether he's not really paying attention to them, whether he's contemplating what he's going to say next. But he bends down and writes with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, here's what he said. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. So go ahead, you, in your perfection, you pick up the rock and throw. So those of us who struggle with looking at other people and thinking, I can't believe they would do, and some of you do that. I know a lot of you, I've been guilty of it, of the same thing as well. The one without sin, Jesus is talking to me and you, pick up the rock and throw it. And it's what he says there, not what he writes in the dirt, that actually makes the difference. You might be tempted to think too, if you're not familiar, that, oh, wait a second, they did catch her in adultery, which is a sin, which in some cases deserves death. Is Jesus just overlooking sin here? Is this no big deal? Is he not addressing it? He'll take care of that. Just be patient. Once more, he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away one by one. See, what they heard from Jesus was, wait a second, you're not really thinking here. It kind of goes back to that judge not in Matthew chapter 7 and the log and the speck in someone else's eye, but the log in my own. When they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, hopefully a reference to wisdom, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. What did this woman look like? How pitiful was she? See, they didn't ask if she had made a mistake. They didn't ask if it was just a moment of passion where she lost her mind. They weren't concerned about her. And now she's left alone with God himself, with the Savior of the world, the one who has the right to condemn, to judge, to throw rocks, to destroy every human being because of sin. And how does he respond to her? How does he address her? In verse 10, Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Now, that's what I was saying about earlier, or talking about earlier. He did address the sin. He did tell her what she was doing was wrong, not acceptable. Don't do it anymore. Apparently, as we all know, Jesus knows her heart, but he takes that into consideration. There's no one left to condemn. He doesn't condemn for whatever reason, because he knows this woman and tells her to go and sin no more. It's the difference in attitude. Some of you out there just want to see people caught, just want to see people in that gotcha moment. I can't believe. And you do it to people like, well, I don't even like the title preacher, but you do it to people like that. And you say, like with elders or preachers or people in prominent positions, and we say, "Oh, I can't believe." Or they say, "Well, you shouldn't say that or do that because you're a preacher." Now, there are higher standards, but come on here. What are we really interested in? Are we interested in tearing somebody down or building them up and helping? Jesus is the only one in that crowd that was interested in helping her. So before you start throwing rocks, find out what you can do to help and ask yourself, how would Jesus handle this situation? And I hope that helps. I know it'll help me with mine, and I hope it helps you with your attitude and your walk with the Lord.